Hello, and welcome to another episode of Baka Breakdown with your hosts, Troy and Jason. A show where we take anime scenes that we find interesting and take a deeper look, deconstruct them, and see what's inside. As always, there's going to be spoilers, and specifically this week it's going to be for Goblin Slayer. There was one in particular scene that I didn't get to dive into in our last book club discussion, which, if you don't know about it, we have a book club discussion that we have every 2 weeks. It's pretty great. That we have a scene where Goblin Slayer approaching the Sword Maiden, and he thinks that she knows something about the mission he just went on that she's not telling him. Take a look.
疑われた理由を聞いても
いくつかある。あの白い何と言ったか。
アリゲータ
ああ、確かそんな名前だったはずだ。あれが偶発的遭遇とは思えん。
では計画的だと。
少なくとも我々を追い返そうとし、一方でゴブリンどもを襲う程度には。
いささか脅迫観念めいていませんか。
これほどの遺跡が正確な地図はなく、ネズミ退治の依頼もなく、冒険者に放置されている。見張りでもいなければありえんことだ。
冒険者についてお詳しいのね。
俺は冒険者ではないがな。つまり地下を見張る何がしかがいたということだろう。あれは使徒だ。地下の守護獣か。
皮肉ですわね。思考心の見つかいが守ってくださるのは町だけなんて。
お前なら気づいたはずだ。女を殺すのも、その場で腹渡を引きずり出すのも、死体をそのままにするのも、ゴブリンの手口ではない。
Alright, so if you've seen the anime, you know that Goblin Slayer's just come back from the sewers. He thinks something's amiss. And as we saw in the last clip, he is unsure where he stands not only with the Sword Maiden, but also what she knows. What did she put him up to? Why did he even need to go down there? This is one of the heroes that defeated the Demon Lord just 10 years earlier. So we can assume that she's a powerful person. Troy, it's interesting throughout this clip that she mentions that other people don't take goblins seriously. You know, she kind of spells out that she's afraid of these things, but do you think there's something else going on?
I think it really ties into the theme of this scene, what she's trying to say to us. And I actually had a really hard time figuring this out. I watched the scene multiple times, and I kept asking myself, you know, what are they trying to say? And eventually I had to boil it down to, why would you even bother to put this in the story? This doesn't even really move the story ahead. Nothing really changes from this scene. And it really gives us, for the Sword Maiden, her whole character, her picture. And like you said, she's hired people to take care of these goblins for her, and she's afraid of these goblins. And also, like you said, she's one of the most powerful characters in this world. She is one of the heroes that has defeated the Demon Lord. And I think it really carries that theme of power does not destroy fear.
Yeah, and it was interesting, too, because she specifically calls out that, she can't call the military. She can't even call upon the adventurers in her town to help her out with this, because she feels this peer pressure. So I was wondering, you know, she kind of fesses up to this whole cover-up, and whether there was any specific wrongdoing on her part, I'd like to get into later. So what do you think about Goblin Slayer, not reporting her to a higher authority, not grilling her more on her actions here? Because there was some stuff that went down before he even got there.
I do think the anime, especially in the dub, but also in the sub, is a little ambiguous with how much she's done to get her plan going, to get Goblin Slayer there. And I think it fits Goblin Slayer's MO, right? He does not care about anything. He doesn't care about saving the world. He does not care about, individual people. He cares about destroying the goblin horde. He even calls out, "You're not a goblin. It's not my problem."
He calls out specifically, the woman that was murdered in the streets and left there for everyone to see. They both agreed that's not what goblins usually do, but they also don't straight up say this is what Sword Maiden did in order to get by off to hire outside help.
Yeah, and she confesses that she knows this whole plan and who's behind it. And in the sub, they even say, "Yeah, the person who's behind this has already been dealt with. But I know what they left behind. I know that those goblins were under there, and I just couldn't handle it. So when something went wrong, I was quick to point a finger, trying to get people to understand." And it's really interesting that this is all told from the perspective of Goblin Slayer, who's, every day is just fighting goblins. And now we come to a woman whose entire life is obsession with goblins, much like Goblin Slayer, but in a very different way, where he's hell-bent on his revenge. She's got this post-traumatic stress disorder from her ordeal with them. They're honestly both affected in that their lives have been completely changed.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, and also the difference between the sub and dub, because I watched them both as well. And it felt like in the dub, she was looking for a solution. She was looking for an answer to her fear. In the sub, it really felt like she was saying, please stay with me and be my goblin bodyguard, and also protect me from my fear. I actually, so just to touch on the technical side of this particular scene, the camera work I found really helped with the emotional impact, specifically with Sword Maiden's responses. She's drawn in a very sensual way, kind of voluptuous, and this particular scene, they chose not to exploit that. They didn't really focus on that. It was a lot of headshots. It was a lot of bringing in close.
I really liked the imagery. After I watched it a couple times, I really started focusing on that little lizard in the fountain, and I kept wondering why are we seeing that? Why do they keep showing that to us? And I guess to me, the water fountain is representative of Watertown, and it's supposed to be like this sacred fountain in the Sword Maiden's garden, and yet there's this little guy just crawling through it, and nobody cares, and no one seems to notice. But it's not the pure water that you might think it is. There is something underneath it, crawling through the grass next to it. I really like that imagery and how it kind of ties in symbolism-wise to the goblins that have infested underneath Watertown that no one's paying attention to as they crawl around.
She mentioned that specifically, like, we have a goblin infestation and it's as if nobody cares. It's as if nobody's noticed it. And I was wondering, do you think the population of Watertown knows the extent of the goblin infestation?
Yes and no, where even if you told them how big it is, but that's just goblins, right? It's like if you tell someone this building's full of rats versus this building's full of pigeons, they might just say, well, pigeons are everywhere in the city, who cares? But they can be just as destructive and cause as much disease and problems. But with rats, like, oh no, in my mind, that's an infestation. But pigeons, those are birds. Birds aren't an infestation. I think it's kind of along those lines.
Which is another question I had. Do you think she may have been, do you think she was forced into this situation where she needed to basically frame this murder and then hire Goblin Slayer? Or do you think she just felt she had no other options?
Forced in the sense that she's broken by the goblins. She is still imprisoned by them in her mind. She does suffer from a very serious mental illness because of her treatment at the hands of the goblin, which is very understandable. And I think, we know there's songs about Goblin Slayer, and when she's heard those, that's where she turned. That was the outlet to deal with this. And I think that's really what she's confessing to Goblin Slayer here is, yeah, I knew how bad this was. I knew it needed to be taken care of, but I cannot take care of it, and I can't convince anyone else to take care of it. But I heard there's one guy who's obsessed, and I played on that to make it happen. Really love the music cues. You know, it starts off with a very tense music as she's starting her confession, and then it goes silent, and then we switch over to this dramatic horns and woodwind sounds that almost kind of sound like a conversation between a deeper voice and a higher pitched voice, as she kind of reaches this epiphany that as long as the Goblin Slayer is out there, there is someone out there to battle her fears. We know that soon after this, we find out the Demon Lord's been dealt with, and she's kind of being saying here, like, the hero's taking care of the problem, but the real problem for us, for people who are affected by this, still remains. And we're going to see that in future episodes of Goblin Slayer from this point, that even post Demon Lord, there's still an issue.
I actually really liked how the anime itself portrayed that particular theme, because the goblins are never going to do a world destruction event, but they are going to ruin people's lives, and they do need to be dealt with.
Yeah, it's like she calls out, you can bring the world to peace, but if a 15-year-old can't feel safe, then what was the point of anything?
I did like how honest he was, because he was like, look, I watched what happened to you from start to finish, and I still don't know how you feel. I thought that was honest and straightforward, and I think it was something she needed to hear, even though she's having this mental anguish. I hope you enjoyed that scene as much as we did. If you haven't seen Goblin Slayer yet, it's definitely worth a watch. It is mature content, so be careful. But if you're also following us on our main Book Style Club anime discussions, we are currently watching That Time I Was Turned Into a Slime. Is that right, Troy?
That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. We're watching the first 13 episodes right now, and then we will be watching part 2 after that.
Wonderful. Well, we'll see you over there. And also, we hope to see you next time on Baka Breakdown. If you have any other scenes that you'd like us to discuss and overanalyze, please hit us up in the comments below. And don't forget to hit a like if you liked what you heard here, and feel free to subscribe to the channel. Let's say goodbye, Troy.
Sayonara.
Thanks for listening.